The old gardener did not pour that jar down the sink. He lifted it, held the cloudy liquid up to the morning light, and smiled like a man who had just found money in a coat he had not worn since winter. 7 days earlier, he had dropped 2 banana peels into plain tap water and sealed the lid. Everyone else in his neighborhood threw those peels into the trash without a second thought. He kept his. By the end of this investigation, you will know exactly how to turn a scrap you were about to discard into the kind of plant food that makes a store-bought bag look like an overpriced mistake. But you will also learn the trap that ruins this method for 9 out of 10 people who try it. The same jar that can revive a dying tomato plant can turn into a reeking, mold-covered disaster if you do it the way most online videos tell you. There is a right way and a wrong way, and the difference is not magic. It is timing, patience, and one detail that almost nobody mentions. Stay with me, because this is where the internet gets it dangerously wrong. You know the feeling. You have bought the expensive fertilizer with a glossy label, followed the instructions on the back, watered your plants exactly as directed, and watched them do absolutely nothing. Maybe the leaves stayed yellow. Maybe the stems stayed weak. Maybe the whole plant just sat there, stubbornly refusing to thrive, while your neighbor's garden exploded with growth. You blamed yourself. You figured you had a black thumb, that gardening simply was not in your blood. But it was never you. It was the system that sold you a product designed to make you depend on it. Here is what is sitting in your kitchen right now, probably in the trash or destined for it. A banana peel. In most homes, that peel gets thrown away without a single thought, as if it were worthless. The old gardener looks at that same peel and sees evidence. He sees potassium, the mineral that plants crave for strong stems and vigorous growth. He sees a resource that costs nothing,
The garden
that
knows
is
its own
available every
secrets.
single day, and
You
that
just
the
need to
gardening
listen
industry
to the soil.
would rather you never understand. Because if you understood, you would stop buying their bags. Here is the trap that has burned so many people who tried this before you. They chopped up a banana peel, dropped it in water, and left it for a day or two. Then they poured that barely changed liquid onto their plants, expecting a miracle. When nothing happened, they declared the whole method a myth and went back to buying the expensive stuff. The old gardener shakes his head at that story every time. A day or two is not nearly enough. The water needs time to do its work, and most people do not have the patience to give it that time. That failure, the 2-day soak that leads nowhere, is the smoking gun. The industry relies on your impatience to keep you buying their bags. Subscribe now so you do not miss the next piece of evidence the old gardener kept hidden in plain sight. And if you have ever been burned by this exact banana peel myth, drop the word 7 in the comments, because now you know what the missing variable was. So he left the peels in the jar for 7 full days. Not 24 hours, not 48. 7 days sealed in a corner of the kitchen where the sunlight could not reach it. And here is the part that surprises people who think they know this trick. The liquid that came out of that jar did not look like water at all. It had turned a deep, cloudy brown, the color of strong tea left to steep too long. There was a faint sweetness to the smell, not unpleasant, not rotten, but definitely not something you would want to drink. Now let me show you what most people do wrong the moment this liquid is ready. They grab a watering can, pour the brown water straight onto the leaves of their plants, and walk away feeling proud of themselves. Within days, they wonder why their plants look worse. The leaves develop dark spots. A fuzzy gray mold appears where the liquid pooled. Fruit flies start circling the pot. What went wrong? The old gardener knows. The liquid that feeds the roots is not the same liquid you should splash across the foliage. One nourishes. The other suffocates and rots. That is why he never pours it on the leaves. He pours it into the soil slowly at the base of the plant, the way you would pour a glass of water for someone who is thirsty. The soil absorbs it, the roots take it up, and the plant drinks in the nutrients it has been starving for. It sounds simple. It is simple. But you would be shocked at how many people never make that distinction and how many abandoned jars of moldy banana water end up in the trash because someone poured the liquid on the wrong part of the plant and blamed the method. Before we get to the exact steps, I want you to meet the man behind this method. He is not a scientist with a lab coat. He is not an influencer with a perfect camera setup. He is just a gardener who has spent decades stubbornly testing things in his own backyard, keeping what worked and discarding what did not. When I asked him why he bothers with banana peels when the store sells fertilizer,
After all these
he
years?
laughed and said something I will never forget. He said the store sells you a promise in a bag. This jar delivers. That is the whole philosophy in one sentence. No mystery, no ancient wisdom, no mystical connection to the earth, just decades of trial and error, of watching what actually happens when you give a plant what it needs and refuse to overcomplicate the process. The old gardener does not care about trends. He cares about results. And the results he gets with a jar of banana peel water are the kind that make people in lab coats blink twice and ask to see it again. Are you still with me? Good, because this next part is where most people lose the thread, and I do not want you to be one of them. The preparation is simple, but it has 3 steps that cannot be skipped if you want the jar to work instead of turning into a science experiment gone wrong. Each step takes almost no effort, but each one matters more than you think. First, you need a clean glass jar with a lid, not plastic if you can help it. Glass lets you see what is happening inside, and it does not hold on to smells the way plastic does. The size does not matter much as long as it is big enough to hold a few peels and enough water to cover them completely. Now take your banana peels and tear them into rough pieces. You do not need to chop them finely. You do not need to blend them. Just tear them into pieces small enough to fit comfortably in the jar so the water can reach every part of the peel. This is the part most people miss.
Most people miss
The pieces should be torn, not left whole. A whole banana peel floats on top of the water like a boat, barely touching the liquid, releasing almost nothing into it. A torn peel sinks and swells, its surface area multiplied, giving the water a chance to pull out what is locked inside. It is a small difference, the kind of detail that seems too minor to matter. But it is the difference between a jar of muddy water and a jar of liquid that actually does something. That tearing detail, the one most people skip, is what separates a jar of murky nothing from a jar that actually feeds your plants. Subscribe if you want to keep getting these exact differences, the ones the experts never mention and the old gardeners guarded like buried evidence. And if you just realize you have been soaking whole peels this whole time, type "torn" in the comments right now so I know who is here paying attention. Now add your water. Plain tap water is fine. You do not need filtered water. You do not need rainwater. You do not need anything fancy. Fill the jar until the peels are completely submerged. Then screw the lid on tight. Do not leave it open. Do not cover it with a cloth. Seal it. You want to keep the air out and the liquid in so nothing else can get in and start growing where you do not want it to grow. Set the jar somewhere out of direct sunlight, a cabinet corner or a shelf away from the window, and leave it alone. This is where the old gardener does something that surprises people. He writes the date on the lid with a marker. 7 days from today, he tells himself, and not a day sooner. The waiting is the hardest part for most people, because the jar sits there doing almost nothing visible for the first few days. The water barely changes. The peels barely break down. You start to wonder if it is working at all. Then around the fourth or fifth day, something shifts. The water begins to darken. The peels start to soften and separate. And by the seventh day, you have something completely different from what you started with. Do not be tempted to open the jar early. I know you will want to check on it. I know the curiosity will eat at you. But every time you open that lid, you let in fresh air. And fresh air is exactly what you do not want in there. The whole point of the sealed jar is to let the water steep slowly without interference, without anything new being introduced. The old gardener leaves his jar completely alone for 7 days. He ignores it, and that patience is what separates his results from the moldy messes that end up in other people's trash cans. When the 7 days are up, you will open the lid and immediately understand what you have been waiting for. The liquid inside will be dark, cloudy, and slightly thick, with a smell that is earthy and faintly sweet. This is not water anymore. This is the result of the peel giving up its minerals to the liquid around it, the potassium and other nutrients seeping out into the water where the plant can actually reach them. The peels themselves will look spent, pale, and soft, their color faded into the water they sat in. Here is where the method splits into 2 paths, and you need to choose the right one. The liquid in the jar is what you will feed to your plants, but you should not pour it straight from the jar. Strain it first. Use a fine mesh strainer or a piece of cloth to separate the liquid from the spent peels. The old gardener pours the liquid into a separate container, then takes the spent peels and buries them directly into the soil at the base of his plants. Nothing goes to waste. The liquid feeds the roots now, and the peels keep working slowly as they break down in the earth. You still with me? Good. The next part is the moment the old gardener lives for. The moment all that waiting finally pays off. He carries the strained liquid out to his garden, walks past the healthy plants without a second glance, and stops in front of the one that has been struggling, the one with the yellowing leaves, the one that looks like it gave up weeks ago. He kneels down, pours a slow stream of the brown liquid into the soil around the base of that plant, and lets the earth drink it in. He does not drench it. He does not pour the whole jar into one spot. He pours a steady, modest amount, letting it soak into the soil, then moves to the next plant and repeats the process. The liquid disappears into the dirt within seconds, leaving no visible trace on the surface. If you were watching from a distance, you would see nothing remarkable at all. Just an old man kneeling in his garden, pouring brown water into the ground, moving from plant to plant with the calm of someone who has done this 1,000 times. But look closer at what happens in the days that follow. That is where the proof lives. The plant that was yellowing starts to change. The leaves deepen from pale yellow to a rich, dark green, the color of health returning where there was only decline before. The stems, which were thin and weak, begin to stiffen, holding the plant upright with a new kind of confidence. The old gardener does not need a microscope to see it. He does not need a laboratory report. He just needs to look at his plants and know that something inside the soil is working. Now, I am not going to tell you that scientists were literally shocked, because that is not how science works. But I will tell you this, the kind of visible improvement that shows up in that plant after so little effort and so little cost is exactly the kind of thing that makes a researcher stop and reconsider what they thought they knew about homemade fertilizers. The plant that was dying is now thriving. The plant that got no treatment at all, sitting right next to it, is still yellow and weak. The difference is right there in front of you. That is the true proof, and it is the proof that matters most. Not a lab test, not a published paper. A struggling plant that recovers while its untreated neighbor keeps struggling is the kind of evidence you can see with your own eyes. The old gardener has that comparison in his garden every single time he tries a new method. He treats one plant and leaves the other alone. The results do not lie. And this time, the treated plant is the one that looks like it belongs in a magazine. That side-by-side test is the only case file you need. The plant doesn't lie, and the evidence is right there in front of you. Subscribe now so you do not miss the next kitchen scrap interrogation, because there is a whole dossier of leftovers we have not opened yet. And if you have ever seen a plant recover from yellow to deep green using something your kitchen threw away, drop the word evidence in the comments. I want to see your testimony, but here is the warning that the internet never gives you, the one that will save your plants if you remember it. This method is powerful, and power can be abused. If you pour this liquid on your plants every single day, or if you use it at full strength on fragile young seedlings, you can do real damage. Too much of a good thing is still too much. The old gardener uses this liquid sparingly, maybe once a week, and he always dilutes it. He mixes 1 part of the strained liquid with a few parts of plain water before he pours it on anything. And if you make the mistake of leaving the peels in the jar too long, past the point where the liquid has gone from earthy to sour, you will get a different result entirely. That sour smell, the one that makes you recoil when you open the lid, is the sign that fermentation has gone too far. The liquid is no longer feeding your plants. It is more likely to harm them, and the mold that grows on the surface will do nothing but attract pests. This is the failure case, the trap that turns believers into skeptics. And it all comes down to one thing: timing. The old gardener does not guess. He does not estimate. He marks the lid and waits exactly 7 days, then uses the liquid right away. If he cannot use it that day, he strains it and stores the liquid in the fridge, where it stays fresh for a few more days. He never lets it sit out on the counter, unsealed, turning into something that belongs in the garbage instead of the garden. That discipline is the whole game. Get the timing right, and the method works. Get it wrong, and you will blame the banana, not the clock. So let me leave you with this image. Picture your own plant, the one that has been sitting there disappointing you for weeks. Now picture it 3 days after you pour that brown liquid into its soil. The leaves turning deep green, the stem standing tall, the whole plant looking like it finally got what it was waiting for all along. That is what the old gardener sees every time he opens that jar. That is what he has known for decades, quietly, without a bag of fertilizer to sell you. And here is the thought that will not let me go. If banana peels can do this, can hold this kind of power that we throw in the trash without a second look, then what else have we been tossing away without understanding what we had? There is another scrap sitting in your kitchen right now that the old gardener has a method for. One that does not need 7 days of waiting, one that works in a completely different way. But that is a case for another investigation. For now, you know what to do with that peel you were about to throw away. Tomorrow morning, start your jar, mark the lid, and give it 7 days to prove what it can do.